Welcome to the Q Podcast.
Q is about conversation.
If we're really concerned about ending poverty, we've got to be more concerned about creating justice.
Our cultural products as Christians need to both defy and resonate with the culture.
But God's doing amazing things. His church is expanding. His church is growing.
It's not what's the purpose of my life, it's what is the purpose that's been assigned.
Stay curious, think well, advance good. This is Q.
Hi, I'm Gabe Lyons. Welcome to another edition of the Q Podcast. It's that season around here. We've got our Christmas tree up in the office, the Christmas music playing, getting ready for our Christmas party in a few days with the team. And I love this time of year because we always create a special bundle, a set of gifts that you aren't going to find anywhere else. We try to curate some of the best gifts for your Christmas season and your Christmas gifts when you decide right now that you're going to plan for 2020 to be with us at our Q 2020 conference. It's taking place in Nashville, April 22nd to 24th. Our talks, our speakers, all of this stuff's coming together again. It's such a critical year. I think we're all feeling it. Of course, it's a new decade, but 2020 creates so many tensions, especially in the political space, the media space, the polarization. And we as leaders in the church, Christians in every field, have to be the ones that are bringing some semblance of peace to this, of understanding, of a collective way of thinking about this that makes sense, that's logical, that's reasonable, that helps root us. Because as we all know, this is dividing a lot of people. And so we believe this April is going to be one of the most special Q moments we've ever had. This is our 14th year, but the planning and preparations have just been extensive, and it's going to be awesome. But here's the deal. When you actually buy your tickets to Q right now, before the end of this month, for Q 2020, and you can do that at qideas.org/2020. Here's what you're going to get. We've got this amazing blanket from Sackcloth and Ashes. It's a cotton tempo blanket from Sackcloth and Ashes. And if you don't know their story, for every blanket purchase, they give a blanket to a homeless shelter in your community. It's amazing. But these are beautiful, soft, just nice blankets. We're giving away our favorite record around here for this season, which is Behold the Lamb of God. It's a Christmas album by Andrew Peterson, amazing artist. He actually led worship last year at our Q event. And then we've also got coffee for you. We've got the Sacred Ordinary Days 2020 Liturgical Year Planner. So that's a brand new book, a resource that's out that just helps you look at your year, but add in liturgy to your life on a daily basis. How do you plan that in? And then for fun, OtterBox is working with us and gave us this great, it's called their 16-ounce tumbler that gives you just tall, big, awesome tumbler, fits in the coffee cup holder in your car. And then finally, one of my favorites, a custom Q hat. So this is like a flat snapback hat with the Q logo, black on black. So anyway, check all that out. Go to qideas.org. You can see what this looks like. You can actually sign up now at qideas.org/2020. And we're going to send all this to you. We're going to send it to you right away once you sign up. Now, today's podcast is one that just fits into us thinking about the next decade. And the reason it does is because this talk is going to help you think about the next 30 years of the church, of the Christian faith, of how the next generation's thinking about faith. The talk was just brilliant. It's by Joshua Crossman, somebody who over the last few years I've gotten to know. He's a board member at a group called the Pine Tops Foundation. But what I love about this foundation is they've decided to put a lot of their money and energy into studying where the future of faith is going and how we can think about what they're calling the great opportunity. So when many people look to the next 30 years and they think about the church, they're thinking kind of negatively, maybe cynically, that I think the church is on decline. Less people are interested in religion. We know that the next generation doesn't care as much about faith. In fact, probably looks down on it and thinks it's part of the problem. Well, in this report, he acknowledges that. Like the work that they did acknowledges that, yes, there's going to be a decline. But what if we took a different approach and saw what the opportunity is? What is the opportunity to plant churches? What is the opportunity for us to really engage the next generation? And how would we do that? And so I don't want to get ahead of this. I want you to listen to it. It's 9 minutes. It'll be quick. But I want you to take it in and just get a sense and start to imagine, how could we see what's about to be a new dynamic in the West about people losing faith in faith as a great opportunity? Let's listen in now to Joshua Crossman.
When we funded our Modest Family Foundation a few years ago, we weren't sure how to best steward our resources, particularly when it came to the American church. So we launched a year-long, rigorous research project to help provide insight for us. The end result? A report that we're making publicly available called The Great Opportunity. We asked 2 questions in this project. How can the U.S. church be more fruitful over the next 30 years? That was the first question we asked. The second was, how can we play a part in it? And what we found surprised us. We found the largest gospel opportunity in the history of the American church. And if we move quickly, we can help tens of millions of young people know Jesus in the next 30 years. That's a pretty audacious claim. How did we get there? Well, right now in the United States, about 73% of the US adult population would self-identify as Christian. We combine that information with what are called switching rate trends. That is, what religion do adults say they're in compared to the one in which they're raised? And then added to that population statistics like mortality, fertility, and immigration. And what we found was that Christian affiliation is going to decline by about 15 to 20% over the next 30 years, down to about 54 to 59% of the US population. That translates into 42 million young people. 42 million people who attend our churches and our youth groups, our Christmas and Easter services, who will say that they were raised in Christian families, and as adults, they'll say they're not. Now, there are questions to be had around the depth of their family's faith now and the eternal consequences, but nonetheless, these are 42 million people that will disaffiliate from a life with Christ. If we can return just to the retention and evangelism rates that we saw in the 1990s, 20 million people will disaffiliate, which means that 22 million more people will know Jesus than otherwise would have. 22 million. That's more than both Great Awakenings, the African American church after the Civil War, the Azusa's revivals, and every Billy Graham conversion combined. It is the largest gospel moment in American history. Now, while these numbers seem incredible, this is not a purely theoretical exercise. This is my family. This is my beautiful wife, Anne, and our 4 children, Josiah, Isaiah, Evelyn, and Evangeline. Statistically, if the trends hold, 2 of our children will walk away from their faith in the next 20 years. And as a parent, that breaks my heart. Anne and I, like most Christian parents, want to take the stewardship of our children as a high calling. We want to pastor them well and introduce them to Jesus. But 2 of our children, if the statistics hold, will walk away. So every day we work on this project, we say, how can we parent and pastor them well? How can we introduce them to Jesus in a way that they might live God and continue a walk with him as an adult? Of course, it's not just my children. It's 42 million sons and daughters, children and grandchildren, brothers and sisters who are walking away from a life with Christ. This is our great opportunity. Now, there's incredible urgency to this moment. Statistically, 96% of all adults make their faith decision before the age of 35. The oldest millennial is now 39. They drive a minivan and probably have 2 kids. The oldest Gen Z is 19, and the last Gen Z will be born this year. We do not have 20 years to start to reach these friends. By then, it'll be too late for most. The moment is now. We cannot wait. We cannot delay. But I am hopeful in this moment. Hope is a uniquely Christian virtue because we have hope in a God who reaches into history to care for his creation. God has moved in generations time and time and time again. And there's so much that we can learn from the example of those who've gone before us. The work in front of us doesn't require some new technique, some undiscovered approach. No, it is the church's historic witness when we are at our best. So today, we're going to unpack 5 themes that are the intersection of the church's historic witness and our present moment. In our report, we have over 30 specific recommendations for funders, ministries, and churches. This is such a solvable problem by God's grace. And of course, all of this starts with prayer. I like how John Tyson describes it. He says, this is the prayer list. So the first thing we want to unpack is that we need to triple church planting. Right now in the United States, we plant 4,000 churches each year, which sounds fantastic, except that we close 3,700 for a net of 300 churches. That's not enough to keep up with population growth, much less the increasing needs of the unaffiliated. Church is the single most effective tool for reaching the lost. An average new church has 40% of the congregation that was previously unchurched. We estimate that we need to plant about 250,000 churches over the next 30 years. Second, we need to transform youth discipleship. The age and stage model of youth discipleship, where you drop a kid off into youth group on a Friday night for a couple hours and they'll end up following Jesus, is empirically less effective today. The good news is we know what works. It's what's always worked. It's parents and adults in the church who take their faith seriously, who walk alongside young people and challenge them to take their faith seriously, and who go on mission with Jesus. Number 3, we need to evangelize digitally. Our historic witness of the church has always been to embrace new media and to use that to spread the good news. Right now in the United States, the average under 35 spends 9 hours a day in front of a screen. And there are over 1 million seeker-related searches each month in the United States. Where are our digital Whitfields and Billy Grahams? Fourth, we need to be famous for our care for the poor. Despite U.S. religious organizations generating $1.2 trillion of social benefit, for the first time, a majority of the unaffiliated think the U.S. church is a net negative to society. In this moment, our dominant public witness must be our care for the poor, so that all might see our good works and glorify our Father in heaven. And finally, we need to build leadership for the long term. Right now, in top 50 universities, only 2 to 3% of professors would self-identify as actively Christian. If we are to engage our culture and sustain the church for the long run, we must love Christ with our minds. We must encourage, support, develop those who are called to a vocation at the university. In Matthew 16, there's a wonderful story. The Pharisees and Sadducees, the religious and cultural elite of their day, they go to Jesus and they ask for a sign to prove his divinity. Jesus' response talks about the weather. He says, hey, you can see the signs in the sky, the clouds. Based on that, you can make some pretty good short-term weather forecasts. The implication, they could see what was happening in the sky, but were blind to what was happening on the ground. They couldn't understand the singular historic moment in which they lived. The signs and wonders, the prophecies fulfilled, the thousands following a man in the desert. It didn't make sense to them. Man, could things just go back to the way they were? Right now, we, the religious elite of our day, are privileged to have the tools and resources to discern the probable departure of tens of millions of our friends and family away from a life with Christ. So will we leave the 59% to save the 41? Will numbers like 16, 22, 35, 42 million break our hearts and bring us to tears? Because these numbers are the very people with whom God has placed us and called us to love. All of us must answer these questions. Will we discern the times in which we live and respond as God would have us, or will we miss our moment? The next 30 years will either see the greatest loss of souls in American history or the greatest move of God on our watch, on our stewardship. I am hopeful. Hope in a God who can redeem the hearts of millions, turning them back to a life spent with him. Hopeful of thousands of towns and communities who have been transformed by the very body of Christ. Hopeful in an eternity walking with those who would have otherwise walked away. This is the greatest gospel opportunity in American history. This is our great opportunity. Thank you.
I love how Josh ends this. I mean, it's right, isn't it? Like, this will be on our watch. Most of us, hopefully, God willing, will be alive over the next 30 years. So what is going to happen? And instead of just sitting back and thinking that it's going to happen to us, how can we just continue to be proactive? How can we be innovative? How can we think about this? Some of the solutions that I like about what Josh talks about here is things that we care a lot about at Q. You know, how do we plant more churches over the next 30 years? How do we use digital information to evangelize? I know for us, Q Media and Q dinners are becoming a great way for people to build new relationships with those who would never darken the door of a church. I mean, Q dinners over this last couple of months, hundreds of people bringing people together in their home, having dinner and having a real conversation around a topic like our loneliness epidemic. I mean, it's amazing. So these types of things, these are the ways forward. This is what people are hungry for. I think as we continue to innovate and create and find more people who are thinking about this and having a hopeful vision for the future, it actually inspires all of us. And that's why I want to remind you, come to Q 2020, April 22nd to 24 in Nashville. If you're a church leader, we're doing for the first time a pre-gathering just for church leaders, really discussing this next decade and what is it going to look like in a post-Christian setting to do discipleship. We're talking about these kinds of ideas. So if you've never been to Q, we want you to come. If you've been before, and maybe it's been a couple years, come back this year. It's going to be an amazing time. We'll have over 2,200 leaders participating. It's already 50% sold out. And so I want you to join us, and you can take advantage of those special Christmas gifts that we're going to give you when you buy 2 tickets or more by the end of December. Go to qideas.org/2020.